The alien captain leveled his weapon and growled, "I'll end you if you don't yield." But the Marine just grinned. That grin wasn't arrogance, it was the first move in a game the aliens didn't even know they were playing. What they didn't realize: humanity doesn't fight fair. We fight smart. And this Marine had been counting every second, every guard shift, every weakness in their gleaming prison. That smile, it was the last thing they'd see before their own fortress turned against them. The Marine's grin wasn't bravado. It wasn't defiance. His teeth showed the way a wolf's do before the kill, not a challenge, but a promise. The alien captain saw disrespect. What he actually witnessed was a predator marking prey. Their kind had studied human expressions. They thought they understood smiles meant fear or submission, but they'd never encountered one that widened as weapons charged. The Marine knew they'd misinterpret it. That was the point. You boys ever have one of those mornings? The words came out lazy, half-formed like he couldn't be bothered to finish the thought. His shoulders slumped just enough to sell it. The alien captain's grip tightened on his weapon, exactly as predicted. Grinding teeth, flaring nostrils. Basic stress tells universal across species. Neuroscience calls this the humor threshold. Laughter drops cortisol levels in the speaker while raising it in aggressors. A survival mechanism older than civilization. The Marine wasn't stalling. He was tipping chemical scales. Light glinted off the captain's polished carapace as he stepped closer. The squad behind him mirrored the movement. Standard intimidation playbook. Perfect. Their boots hit the deck plating in unison, which meant they weren't watching the Marine's left hand. 2 fingers tapped against his thigh in deliberate rhythm. Not a signal, a count. Every alien pulse rate he'd monitored since capture spiked with his provocation. Erratic now. Distracted. "You kill me now," the Marine said, scratching his stubble. "Who's gonna explain why your reactor's running 3 degrees hot?" He let that hang just long enough for doubt to creep in. Their blinking patterns changed. 4 rapid, then a pause. The tell he'd waited for. It wasn't about the bluff. It was about the hesitation. That quarter second where their leader's mandibles twitched instead of giving the order. Time bought. Distance closed. Phase 1 complete. They thought fear was something they could weaponize, a tool to break prisoners with. The Marine knew better. Fear was fuel. His smile didn't mean he wasn't afraid. It meant he'd already burned that fear down to cinders. The aliens still carried theirs like loaded guns. Where I'm from, folks don't take kindly to ultimatums. The Marine leaned back against the bulkhead, arms loose at his sides. His tone didn't match the scene. Calm like a sergeant explaining field sanitation to new recruits. Not a trace of tension in his jaw or hands. That unnerved them more than shouting would have. Alien cultures built power structures on immediate dominance. Threat vectors. Absolute obedience. Humanity's playbook ran deeper. Older. They didn't posture. They waited. The captain's weapon hummed higher. Cycling to kill setting. Standard escalation. Predictable. The Marine barely glanced at it. "See, y'all keep mistaking patience for politeness." He scratched his eyebrow with his thumbnail, a calculated fidget. The alien's pupils dilated, tracking the movement. Classic distraction reflex. Sun Tzu called it the weakness feint, not deception, misdirection. Let the enemy charge at what they think is vulnerability while you map their patterns. The Marine wasn't stalling. He was data mining. Silence stretched. 3 seconds. 5. The captain's breathing hitched first. Small victory. No trained interrogator breaks that fast. You'll kneel or burn. The alien's vocal flaps trembled on the last word. Telltale stress vibration. The Marine filed that tick away alongside 17 others he'd cataloged since capture. "Spit in your boots before?" He grinned at their confusion. Not a taunt, a probe. Their mandibles flared. Aggression response. Carapace plates on 2 guards clacked. Nervous system override. Third one's left antenna twitched. Suppressed dissent. Bingo. Classic interrogator reversal. Make them react instead of act. Every flinch betrayed hierarchy cracks. The squad leader's grip shifted. Discomfort with excessive force. Younger guard's weapon dipped a millimeter. Hesitation. Tiny fractures in their unity. The Marine exhaled through his nose. Controlled. Measured. Ultimatums are for amateurs. He let the words hang, watching how each alien processed the concept. Their blinking patterns diverged now, no longer synchronized. Phase 2 clicked into place. They'd entered his battlefield the moment they demanded submission. Human history wrote the playbook on asymmetric warfare. David's sling, Trojan horses, Hanoi's tunnel rats. Underdogs don't fight fair, they rewrite the rules. One guard's weapon barrel drifted left, another's right. No overlapping fields of fire anymore. The Marine's shoulders relaxed further. They were too busy dissecting his words to notice their own formation crumbling. The captain regained control first. Final warning, his voice cracked on the second syllable. The Marine's smile didn't reach his eyes this time. Warning received. He rolled his neck, tendons popping, not stress relief. Signaled to the others. Now let me show you what happens when we stop warning back. Their weapons flared to life simultaneously, precisely as the Marine's boot scraped across a specific deck plate. Coincidence to them. Countdown for him. 5 minutes since the last guard rotation. Right on schedule. Ultimatums require two parties playing the same game. The aliens never realized they'd been sidelined 20 hours ago, when human POWs started marking shift changes in rust streaks along the ducts. The Marine flexed his fingers. Not preparing to fight? Testing circulation after 2 days of deliberately slack bindings. Another weakness they'd misinterpreted. Outside, a coolant line burst. The alien spun toward the sound. All but one. The youngest guard's antennae stayed locked on the Marine. Smart kid. Too late. Oxford psychologists proved it in 2047. True control isn't forcing compliance. It's dictating reaction timing. The Marine hadn't just mapped their behavior. He'd scripted it. Lights flickered. Emergency protocols engaged automatically across the ship. Standard procedure for reactor instability. Also the exact distraction window needed for 12 prisoners to disappear from 3 separate holding blocks. The captain never noticed his comlink blinking. Too busy monologuing, the Marine tuned him out, counting heartbeat intervals between distant thumps echoing through the vents. Right on tempo. Their mistake was fundamental. They thought war was about imposing will. The Marine knew better. Conflict's core is pattern recognition. And humans? We've had millennia to master reading between the lines. Smoke curled under the doorway. Not an accident. A receipt. Phase 3's delivery confirmation. The Marine finally stood straight. No more slouching. No more grins. Now that I've got your full attention, he said, rolling his sleeves, let's discuss surrender terms. Their weapons trembled. His didn't. Ultimatums only work when the other side cares about the deadline. The aliens were still watching the clock. The Marines had already moved past midnight. The chamber doors slid open with a hiss designed to echo. 4 silhouettes entered in perfect unison, aquatic delegations' membranes glistening under the harsh lights, crystalline representatives refracting prismatic shadows across the walls, Aven emissaries with wings folded in judicial precision, insectoid counselors moving as one articulated mass. Their footfalls made no sound. A power play. The Marines stayed seated, their first miscalculation. The council expected immediate supplication. They'd crafted entire rituals around frightened defendants scrambling upright. The Marine examined his nails instead. Your designation suggests military hierarchy. The crystalline speaker's voice vibrated at a frequency meant to disorient. Standard interrogation tactic. The Marine's inner ear had been inoculated against sonic weapons 2 tours back. He blinked slowly. Processed each counselor's stance. The avian one hovered slightly. Dominance display. Aquatic delegates' gills flared rhythmically. Stress response. Insectoid collective swayed left, right cluster arguing. Crystalline leader pulsed brighter, frustration manifesting as light refraction. Asked why you smiled during sentencing. The avian's beak clacked on the last word. Ritualized punctuation. The Marine stretched his legs. Not defiance, comfort, another provocation. History lesson, he said, rubbing a smudge off his boot. Earth 1961. Soviet cosmonaut becomes first man in space. Americans don't quit. They land on the moon 8 years later. Pause. Let them process. 1940. Britain stands alone against Nazi blitzkrieg. Bombs fall for 57 nights straight. Civilians sleep in subway tunnels. Next spring, same rubble becomes airfields. They didn't just survive. They rebuilt while still bleeding. The avian's wings twitched. The Marine noted the tremor. Filed it. Question wasn't about human resilience, the crystalline leader interjected. Light patterns shifted to violet condescension spectrum. It concerned your inappropriate display. The Marine's knuckles cracked as he flexed his hands. Deliberate. The sound made two insectoid attendants flinch. Smiles the same one my platoon wore in Jakarta when the monsoon washed out our extraction point. Swam 12 clicks through flooded streets with 50 pounds of gear. Laughed the whole damn way. Silence. The aquatic delegate's membranes fluttered. The Marine tracked the pulse rate, elevated. You misunderstand, the crystalline leader pulsed gold now, attempting reason. This isn't about courage. It's about inevitability. The Marine stood. Not quickly. Not slowly. Precisely timed to intersect with the lighting system's cycle. When the overheads flickered in routine maintenance, his shadow stretched suddenly across the council. They recoiled instinctively. Inevitability's a funny thing. His boots scuffed deliberate patterns on the polished floor. Every drag left micro-abrasions. 914 machine guns invented. Generals said cavalry charges were obsolete. August 8, 1918. Australian light horsemen take Beersheba in last successful mounted charge in modern warfare. The insectoid collective's antennae stiffened. The Marine took a single step forward. They compensated with half-step retreats, entire unit moving as one. Beautiful tactical cohesion, and utterly predictable. Problem with superior technology, he continued conversationally, is it breeds rigid thinking. His heel ground something into the flooring. Later, forensics would identify it as carbonized alloy, scraped from his boot sole. Irrelevant then. Significant now. The avian delegate ruffled feathers. Threat display. You overestimate human adaptability. The Marine smiled. Different from before. No teeth showed. Battle of Carhae. 9,000 Roman legionnaires versus 10,000 Parthian horse archers. Romans were shield wall specialists. Parthians shot backward from saddles. Crassus's men had never encountered mounted archery. Know how that ended? The crystalline leader darkened toward indigo, signaling impatience. The Marine noted which counselors checked its color shift before reacting. Hierarchy mapped. Point being, he said, pivoting slightly to put the aquatic delegate at his 10 o'clock. We've been the underdog since we climbed down from trees. Every empire that said we'd break. His thumb found a seam in his trousers. Seemingly idle motion. Perfect alignment. We bury them instead. New shadows crept across the floor. The council didn't notice. They were too busy interpreting micro-expressions. The Marine wasn't. Secondary lighting engaged along the ceiling. Emergency protocol during solar flare activity. Precisely on schedule. The Marine's eyes never left the crystalline leader as the red glow cascaded downward. Their guards missed it. The council missed it. The Marine didn't. In the new light, every scuff mark on the floor became suddenly visible. Invisible under white light, the carbon scoring arranged itself into 3 distinct patterns. Letters, numbers, coordinates. The avian delegate shifted again. This posturing changes nothing. Above them, vents cycled fresh air with a metallic tang. The Marine inhaled deeply. His pupils dilated, not from fear. Oxygen saturation spiking, a scent like ozone and burnt copper. Funny you should mention change. He rolled his shoulders. A guard tightened his grip on a shock rod. The Marine ignored him. Tracked instead how the crystalline leader's light pattern stuttered for 0.8 seconds. Not a glitch. An external signal disruption. Phase 3 indicators lit up across his mental checklist. Council was warned about human prisoners, he said conversationally. Told we'd improvise weapons from nothing. Advised to strip us bare. His fingers brushed the hem of his shirt. Missed the memo about skin being conductive, didn't you? The insectoid cluster recoiled in perfect sync. Trained response. The avian's beak gaped, unscripted shock. The crystalline leader flared white. Alarm frequency. Too late. Down in engineering, 12 human prisoners pressed bare palms against different sections of the ship's hull. No tools, no weapons. Just sweat and body heat generating precise thermal signatures against the alloy. The council's mistake was fundamental. They'd prepared for human rebellion. Stockpiled counters for every conceivable weapon. They never considered the prisoners themselves might be the trigger. The Marine's whisper wasn't accidental. Volume calibrated to reach exactly 3 nearby cellmates, while the guard's audio sensors registered only ambient noise. Phase 1 is just a distraction. His fingers moved in the shadows, not sign language, but something older. Shipyard semaphore from the days when dock workers coordinated under foremen's noses. They'd strip-searched prisoners 12 times since capture, removed laces, belts, anything resembling tools. The guards never noticed how their boot threads collected alloys flecks with every shuffle across the detention block, or how human hands kept finding reasons to touch the deck plating during transport. In 1943, Stalag Luft III prisoners built a glider from bed slats and mattress covers. Guards saw only compliant POWs staging concerts. The Marine remembered those grainy archival photos as he ground his heel against a particular weld seam, not trying to break it, polishing it. Alien security focused on hands in motion. Human prisoners' new posture could conceal more than darkness. The avant-garde's peripheral vision missed how the Marine's latest capitulation bow positioned his left temple against a coolant pipe. Vibration conduction told him more than any surveillance feed. 37 seconds between pump surges. Irregular. A flaw in their life support grid. Tell me about the gardens. The interrogator's question was standard. Psychological profiling through recreational preference. The Marine obliged with elaborate descriptions of earth botany. Tomato stakes, trellis systems, irrigation lines. They recorded every word while missing the subtext. The gardening talk wasn't poetic. It was logistics. On day 17, the aliens permitted recreational repurposing of food containers. A kindness, they thought. The hydroponic greens growing in those containers served two purposes. Obviously, nutritional supplement. Subtly, pH indicators. The faint discoloration of certain leaves mapped the air filtration system's weak points. Nobody looked twice at prisoners tending plants. At 0347 ship time, the Marine coughed violently during head count, dramatic enough to make the insectoid guard step back. The fit lasted precisely 6 seconds, long enough for 3 cell blocks to register the exact interval, before emergency lights engaged automatically. Systemlag, a diagnostic artifact human lungs could measure more accurately than their sensors. They'd removed every shoelace from the detention block. Overlooked how woven fabric could be repurposed from uniforms when you knew which stitches to unpick slowly over weeks. The guard saw prisoners sitting quietly. Never noticed the rhythmic picking at seams during meditation periods. Phase 1 didn't require smuggled tools. It ran on something aliens consistently undervalued: predictable routines. Every guard shift changed at precise intervals. Every patrol paused for exactly 45 seconds at checkpoint Gamma. Security systems rebooted on a fixed schedule. The Marines people hadn't hacked their network. They'd memorized its heartbeat. When the alien quartermaster distributed meal trays, humans noted which sections were hottest after transit. Not complaining about cold food, mapping heat dissipation patterns through the ship's infrastructure. Their complaint forms became blueprints. The crystalline warden prided itself on prisoner oversight. It missed how human blinking patterns synchronized during certain interrogations, not communication. Calibration. Biological clocks syncing to the ship's irregular artificial gravity pulses. Avant-gardes tracked eye movement for deception cues. They failed to register how human pupils dilated subtly when specific systems engaged nearby. Involuntary reactions to electromagnetic shifts no alien species could detect without instruments. The distraction wasn't what they'd staged for alien cameras. Mock escape attempts. Petty arguments between prisoners. The real misdirection happened in plain sight. 27 humans pretending to be model captives while their bodies passively mapped every system fluctuation. Stalingrad taught this lesson first. Factory workers repurished industrial wreckage into tank traps, now with schematics. Through intimate knowledge of how metal fatigues under torsion, the Marines' crew applied the same principle, here using their captivity as reconnaissance when the first containment alarm finally sounded, deliberately tripped by a prisoner's staged escape attempt. Security teams mobilized exactly as predicted. Standard response pattern. Drill number 4. The aliens congratulated themselves on foiling the breakout. They never realized the entire spectacle existed to make them reveal backup generator activation sequences. Phase 1 complete. While guards celebrated intercepting the distraction, 12 human prisoners stood quietly in separate detention blocks, each pressing bare feet against different sections of deck plating, recording thermal transfer rates through their skin, mapping power conduits through somatic feedback no scanner could register. The gardening metaphor held. Before sowing seeds, you must study the soil, not just its composition, how it breathes, when it sleeps, what makes it stir. Phase 1 prepared the ground. Now the harvest began. Curfew approached. The Marine stretched on his bunk, joints popping, another casual sound that masked the scrape of carbon scoring against a specific bulkhead seam. His cellmate coughed 3 times in rapid succession. Not illness. Timing marker. Somewhere in engineering, an alarm chirped about minor thermal variance in conduit junction B7. Routine alert. Below notice threshold. Unless you knew human prisoners had spent 3 weeks subtly altering that section's heat signature through posture and body heat alone. Lights dimmed on schedule. The Marine closed his eyes, smiling. Not at the darkness. At the patterns within it. Phase 2 would be louder. The Marine rolled the scrap metal between his fingers, a twisted shard from a food dispenser's housing panel. Useless by alien metrics. Couldn't hold a charge. No circuits. Not even the correct alloy for their recyclers. They'd let it sit in the waste bay for 3 weeks. Every guard post focused on confiscating what appeared. Dangerous knives, wires, sharps. The crystalline warden had personally scanned for electronic signatures. Missed how human hands could make tools from anything that cast a shadow. Industrial revolutions left their mark. Humans came from a species that once turned flint into blades, whalebone into armor, rust into medicine. The alien's mistake was assuming primitive meant simple. Mid-meal, the Marine's fork slipped, clattered to the floor. The Avon guard watched him retrieve it, standard procedure, but missed how his thumbnail tested the metal's flex point. Stress fractures formed at specific angles when aluminum fatigued. He rubbed the tines absently against his sleeve. Oxidation patterns told him everything about the ship's atmospheric composition. Stalingrad's factory workers hadn't needed schematics to sabotage German tanks. They used hammers meant for rivets as bludgeons. Lathe parts became shivs. The Marine's crew worked the same way, not repurposing objects, revealing their dormant functions. A torn blanket seam became a measuring cord. Scattered food pellets marked guard rotations when arranged in accidental spills. The aliens scanned for transmitted signals but had no protocols for prisoners using their own pulse rates as metronomes. Phase 2 didn't start with some grand uprising. It began when the insectoid quartermaster noticed missing utensil parts. Not the handles. Not the blades. The round midsections where stress concentrated after 700 precise bends. Behind containment fields, humans sat cross-legged. Meditating, the guards assumed. What they actually did was rub calloused fingertips against specific deck seams, not trying to wear them down, learning their vibration signatures. Every metal has a song before it snaps. The aliens stripped search after every meal. They never think to scan the prisoner's teeth. Enamel wears down at exact rates when chewing certain alloys. Microabrasions became calipers measuring material hardness. Bathroom breaks followed strict schedules. Guards missed how human prisoners timed hand-washing to study water pressure fluctuations in the pipes. Each change mapped another junction in the ship's circulatory system. One prisoner started humming. Others picked it up at intervals. No discernible melody. The crystalline lieutenant scolded them for noise. Never realized the vibrations harmonized with the waste reclamation unit's cycle. At the 3rd bar, a specific panel rattled loose. Not enough to notice. Enough to reach. Warsaw ghetto fighters made grenades from light bulbs and match heads. The Marines' people worked smaller. They folded food wrappers into precise angles, not to cut but to reflect light onto the same ceiling sensor for exactly 14 seconds. Overheated the lens just enough to distort its feed during shift change. Alien security protocols accounted for every tool in their armory. Couldn't comprehend weapons that ceased to exist after use. Melted ice became illicit water levels. Spilled grease marked patrol paths when stepped in. Even their own surveillance drones unwittingly aided the prisoners. The Marine memorized blind spots by tracking where cleaning drones consistently missed dust. Accumulation. The turning point came during routine maintenance. A human coughed violently as technicians passed the cell block. The guard glared while the prisoner wheezed into his fist. Neither noticed how his other hand caught a single drifting screw from the repair cart's loose, hinged teeth marks on that screw's head would later match stress patterns on the primary coolant valve's manual override. Coincidence, the tribunal called it. The Marine called it metallurgy. Advanced species see only finished tools. Humans recognize weapon potential in raw materials. A snapped spoon isn't trash, it's a lockpick with perfect tensile strength. Shredded uniform fibers become fuses when braided tight. Even prisoners' own hair could be knotted into timing devices when you account for humidity's effect on keratin contraction rates. The aliens thought they'd removed every sharp object. They forgot human fingernails grow 0.5 millimeter per week. 12 prisoners with 8 weeks growth. That's over 4 centimeters of biological polymer, no scanner flags. Final inventory showed nothing missing from storage. No contraband found during shakedowns. Yet 19 critical systems failed simultaneously at hour mark 46. Not sabotaged directly, nudged into collapse through accumulated stressors. A ceramic insulator scratched just enough to crack under load. A conduit joint weakened by temperature variations from strategically placed body heat. Reconstructors found the weapons afterward. Nearly invisible, a food tray's edge worn down over weeks to focus reflected sunlight like a burning glass. Scuff marks near life support controls that aligned perfectly with human arm spans when leaning casually against walls. Surveillance logs showed prisoners behaving normally up to the moment systems failed. Because they had been. Cooking starch into adhesive counted as normal when you'd done it since kindergarten crafts. Fraying blanket threads into fine powder was standard textile wear. The tribunal kept searching for devices. The Marines had used physics, leverage, friction coefficients, everything disposable enough to leave no evidence after use. When the first engine failed, investigators found no tool marks. Just perfect alignment of metal fatigue points no single prisoner could have caused alone, until they cross-referenced work logs. 18 different humans passing that junction daily, each pausing at staggered intervals to adjust ill-fitting shoes against the same conduit cover. Their final report called it systemic failure. The Marines called it Phase 3. No prisoner held a weapon when containment fields dropped. Because they didn't need to anymore. The ship itself had become the tool. Guards rushed to armories, found racks intact, safeties engaged. Meaningless when atmospheric controls had already been silently adjusted to increase oxygen mix. Just enough to quicken alien metabolisms. Their own enhanced biology turned against them. Faster fatigue, impaired cognition. Precisely calculated. The Marine stepped over fallen sentries without looking down. Didn't bother taking their weapons. He palmed the same twisted scrap metal from the waste bay instead. By now the aliens understood their mistake. Human tools don't look dangerous until they're inside your systems, working quietly where scanners don't reach. Advantage doesn't come from superior tech. It comes from understanding every material's hidden potential. Even trash, even flesh, even the enemy's own protocols turned into weapons by patient hands. Phase 4 began in darkness, with a spark. Just like the earliest campfires, primitive, effective. The rest was geometry. The Marine's teeth gleamed in the dim holding cell light, but his eyes stayed flat and cold. Not the frantic grin of a man clinging to bravado. The smile of someone who'd already done the math. When the alien captain hissed about executions, the Marine chuckled low in his chest. Not because he wasn't afraid, because he'd learned long ago that fear was just adrenaline waiting for instructions. Children smile like that at bonfires after hearing ghost stories. The expression of a species that stopped fearing the dark because it learned to thrive there. Vietnam tunnel rats told similar tales. Emerging from black subterranean hells into sunlight, grinning not because the danger was past, but because they'd proven something to themselves. The Marine's face held that same quiet knowledge. Humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage wasn't tools or intelligence. It was the ability to stare into the abyss and smile back. Boarding teams finished their work. One raised a hand in silent query. The Marine shook his head once. No executions. No prisoners. Just withdrawal. The message wasn't in the destruction. It was in the precision of it. Hiroshima had taught that lesson first. Total war could end in moments if demonstrated properly. This was the spaceborne equivalent. Phase 4's brilliance wasn't its brutality. It was its restraint. The Marine turned to leave. Paused at the blast door. Didn't look back when he spoke. Tell the next ones. His voice carried perfectly over the dying ship's groans. We remember. Then he was gone. Not dramatically. Just absent between one breath and the next. Silence reclaimed the bridge. Not peaceful. Not even tense. Empty in the way only complete understanding can bring. The captain finally moved. Not toward weapons or controls. To the main display, where human ships now retreated in perfect unison. No celebration. No transmissions. Just departure. Final damage reports scrolled beside the tactical feed. Critical strikes only. No overkill. Engineering would have the dreadnought spaceworthy in 6 standard months. Crew casualties 2.3%, precisely enough to prove the humans could have slaughtered them. Chose not to. Tokyo, 1945, understood this arithmetic. The value of leaving some buildings standing beside the ruin. Proof the destruction was selective, not desperate. The captain's mandibles clicked twice. Ritual acknowledgement of defeat in his culture. His officers remained still. Not in obedience. Shock. Human boarding teams had left something behind. Not explosives or trackers. Small gray cubes positioned throughout the bridge. No alien scanner could determine their purpose. It took 3 minutes for realization to dawn. The cubes were nothing. Literal waste material from the ship's own recyclers, shaped into perfect forms and left like calling cards. Insult? It's a message. We turned your trash into psychological weapons. The alien captain finally understood the Marine's smile. Not triumph. Anticipation. Of this exact moment when superior technology and numbers meant nothing against sheer ingenuity. When the invaders became the invaded. When monsters realized they were just prey in a different ecosystem. This was the smile humanity gave when threats became lessons. When predators became cautionary tales. The dreadnought's surviving crew would tell this story for generations. Not as warriors defeated in battle, but as students outclassed by masters. Phase 4 had burned that truth into galactic history. Not with plasma or explosives. With a quiet, knowing grin. Outside, the last human ships winked into FTL. No fanfare. Just gone, the smile remained. The galaxy learned that day, not through speeches or treaties, through a Marine's smile in the face of certain death. That grin held centuries of human resilience. Each war, each survival etched into DNA. The dreadnought's wreckage became a monument. Not to destruction, to ingenuity. Prisoners turning trash into tools. Sailors using patience as camouflage. A fleet appearing from nothingness to deliver one perfect lesson. Remember this moment not for what burned, but for what ignited. The realization that some species don't just endure adversity, they weaponize it. Humanity doesn't surrender, it smiles, and the universe trembles at what comes next. Special Forces trainers break recruits down to this truth in week 3 of Hell Month. That shaking hands still pull triggers. That nausea sharpens awareness. What matters isn't eliminating fear, it's filing off its serial number and pressing it into service. The Marines in that cell block weren't laughing from courage. They were laughing because they'd repurposed their terror into fuel 2 hours into captivity. The avant-garde bristled at their mirth, mistook it for insanity. Their species equated composure with discipline, discipline with rigid control. Humans had different equations. Vietnam tunnel rats went underground with nothing but a pistol and a flashlight. No helmets, no backup. Just the knowledge that every breath might be their last and the dark jokes they made about it beforehand. That humor wasn't coping, it was calibration. The Marine's grin widened as the captain detailed their impending deaths. His squad started coughing, disguising laughs as throat clearings, not defiance, synchronization. Each chuckle sent vibrations through the deck plates that human ears registered but alien audio, dampeners filtered out as biological noise, passive sonar. Mapping.1916. British troops kicked soccer balls across no man's land before going over the top at the, not morale boosting, psychological warfare. A message to the German trenches about what kind of men were coming for them. The Marine squad sent a similar message every time they grinned at torture demonstrations. Phase 1 conditioning had been simple. Let the aliens see them react normally to pain for 3 days. Flinch at threats. Show fear when guards approached unexpectedly. Then mid-interrogation on day 4, the Marine had suddenly laughed at an execution threat. The shift was calculated. Delta Force call it threshold reset. Prisoners who transition abruptly from fear to amusement short-circuit interrogators' expectations. The Marine hadn't just changed his own reactions. He'd moved the goalposts for every human in the block. By week 2, guards hesitated before delivering beatings. Unsettled when blows only drew laughter instead of screams. They doubled down on brutality, missing the strategic error. Human pain tolerance increases with repetition while captors' stomach for violence often wanes. A mismatch the Marines exploited. The insectoid lieutenant thought it was monitoring prisoners. Actually, the humans were running a field study. Every flinch, every smirk, every time a guard's antennae twitched before striking. All data points in a psychological profile. When the crystalline warden demanded why they laughed at death, the Marine gave the truth wrapped in a riddle. Same reason farmers sing while planting. You gotta bury things deep if you want them to grow right. The aliens took it as philosophy. The Marines knew it as operational doctrine. Special operators trained to reroute panic the way engineers divert rivers. Tunnel vision becomes focus. Trembling hands steady through controlled breathing. That chemical taste of dread? Just the body's early warning system saying, pay attention. The guards never realized each laughing fit correlated with systems checks. Human voices masked the sound of security scanners cycling through frequency sweeps. Every giggle covered a timing marker as prisoners noted patrol rotations in scuffed floor patterns. POWs in the Hanoi Hilton tapped messages through walls using a code based on coughs and sneezes. The Marines' crew updated the technique. Their laughs followed Fibonacci sequences when new guards entered the block. Basic psychological conditioning. Make the enemy associate humor with unease. At hour 48 of the final siege, when atmosphere controls failed and emergency lighting painted the corridors blood red, the Marines were the only ones still cracking jokes. Not because they weren't scared, because they'd weaponized that fear weeks earlier. The aquatic lieutenant finally understood when it found human prisoners casually leaning against junction boxes during a supposed riot. Their laughter had been cover for the real work, using chest vibrations to find resonant frequencies in the ship's infrastructure. Leningrad survivors knew this truth instinctively. When artillery shells rain daily, you stop screaming at impacts. Start timing gaps between salvos instead. Turn terror into a measuring system. The Marine and his squad had simply applied that lesson to alien captivity. Final incident reports noted baffling human behavioral patterns during the takeover. How prisoners smiled while sabotaging engines. How they quipped one-liners while overriding security protocols. The investigators missed the connective tissue. Every laugh coincided with a power fluctuation or guard distraction. Not random mirth. Orchestrated misdirection. When the Dreadnought's core went critical, the Marine's last transmission to command was 4 words delivered with perfect composure. Tell command we're square. The aliens monitoring the channel assumed it was code. It wasn't. It was dark humor nobody else would get. Back on Earth, Marine barracks had running bets about who'd rack up the highest adrenaline debt during missions. The kind of joke only people who'd faced death too many times could make. The ship blew apart in perfect silence. No final screams, no curses, just the dark and the void. Humanity's real victory wasn't escaping. It was proving fear could be dismantled and reassembled as a tool. That laughter in the face of annihilation wasn't madness, it was math. Buried deep enough, even terror grows useful. The bridge monitors flared to life at 02:47 ship time. Alien sensor grids had scanned that sector 17 minutes earlier. Found nothing. Crew logs showed the duty officer yawned during the final sweep. Human ships didn't decloak. They simply stopped pretending to be asteroids. Modern stealth doesn't hide objects. It manipulates attention. Those cosmic debris fields the Dreadnought passed 6 hours prior hadn't matched any known stellar composition. No alarms sounded because debris doesn't compute as threat. The fleet's approach vectors exploited that blind spot, entering sensor range at angles matching background radiation. Submarines taught humanity this lesson first. German U-boats in Wadituyu would linger near shipping lanes for days, engines off, tracking targets by hydrophone, patience as camouflage. The alien captain realized his mistake the moment 36 human vessels resolved on screens. Their formation wasn't random. Each ship occupied the exact position where previous glitches had appeared in their sensor logs over the past week. Impossible, the crystalline tactical officer pulsed. His light pattern stuttered violet-white, stress frequencies. The screens disagreed. Capital ships slid into attack positions with glacial precision. No engine flares, no energy surges. Just cold metal appearing where emptiness had been. The alien systems weren't faulty. They'd been conditioned. 3 weeks of intermittent sensor ghosts from that quadrant had trained operators to dismiss anomalies. Human EW specialists call this the boy who cried wolf protocol. False positives breed complacency. There'd been signs. A flicker in the long-range scopes during shift change. static bursts correlating with human prisoners' coughing fits. All logged, all dismissed as cosmic interference. The Marine's grin during yesterday's interrogation took on new meaning. He hadn't been smiling at threats. He'd been counting down. Fleet Command learned from submariners. Soviet K-19 once sat undetected beneath a U.S. carrier group for 38 hours by matching speed to ocean currents. The human fleet applied similar principles to orbital mechanics. Their thrust burns coincided with solar flare activity. Engine heat bled into the background glow of Nebula M77. Alien analysts later found the pattern. Ships didn't move continuously. They pulsed. 30 minutes of acceleration, 6 hours drift. Repeat. Velocity changes small enough to register as sensor calibration errors. The fleet wasn't invisible. It was ignored. Magic trick, the Marine said, watching screens light up across the cell block. His shackles clicked open. Not hacked. Worn. The alloy fatigued from precisely angled pressure during 11 days of adjusting his restraints. Guards had seen discomfort. They'd missed metallurgy. Phase 4's brilliance wasn't technology. It was timing. Alien commanders expected stealth to mean cloaking devices. Human engineers built ships that moved slower than attention spans. Vostok Station, 1957. Soviet scientists discovered something vital about perception. Test subjects shown gradually intensifying light consistently missed the exact moment visibility began. The transition point became clear only in retrospect. The fleet exploited that lag. Every failed scan, every dismissed blip had been intentional. Not just hiding, teaching the enemy what to overlook. By the time recognition dawned, targeting solutions were already locked. Tactical. The captain's shiver mane stood rigid. Full sweep. Where did they? His vocal flaps clamped shut as secondary screens activated. 50 Gengdur wreaths bloomed across the system. Not just warships. Jump gates humming to life. Minefield self-deploying. Automated drones emerging from comet shadows. An avalanche doesn't announce itself before the first pebble falls. The crystalline tactical officer's light patterns flickered diagnostics. No system malfunctions detected. No breaches reported. Just overwhelming presence where moments prior there'd been void. Human logistics vessels already occupied high anchor points. Their cargo bays yawned open. Not for supplies. For boarding craft Berlin, 1945. Soviet forces didn't storm the Reichstag at dawn. They waited until fog rolled in. Not for cover, for psychological effect. An army materializing from mist breaks morale faster than artillery. The fleet's emergence followed the same playbook. Alien long-range scanners got their first clear readings 12 seconds after the ambush began. Data streams scrolled with impossible figures. Hull compositions matching scrap metal from the prison block's waste reclamation. Drive signatures identical to power fluctuations recorded during human resistance exercises. Every piece was there. They'd been holding it upside down. Bridge crews scrambled to battle stations. Too late. Target locks acquired during the confusion of their own alarm klaxons. The Marine's final transmission before cutting local comms was characteristically succinct. Welcome to the jungle. First strikes weren't torpedoes or railgun volleys. They were logistics. Particle beams sliced not at engines or weapons, but at sensor clusters and comm relays. Surgical, methodical. A lesson from Solomon Islands night fighters. Blind the enemy before breaking his bones. Alien archives later revealed the fatal assumption. Their tacticians estimated minimum safe distance for fleet emergence as 0.3 light seconds. Human vessels appeared at 0.1, close enough to watch crew rotations through viewports. The Dreadnought's final log entry before main power failed captured the essential miscalculation. They weren't hiding. They were here the whole time. Phase 4's genius was simplicity. The fleet didn't outmaneuver sensors. It became part of the scenery. Like prisoners scratching coordinates into mess hall tables, the signs were always visible. Just unrecognized until the moment of revelation. Radar operators during the London Blitz had a term for missed detections. The seen but not looked at, the human. Fleet's entire strategy distilled to those 5 words. Silence fell across the bridge as last systems died. Not the quiet of defeat. The hush between lightning and thunder. The Marine stood over the captain, tapping a stolen sidearm against his thigh in perfect rhythm with distant explosion shocks. Your scanners worked fine, he said, watching the aliens' pupils dilate. Problem was the thing staring back. Security footage from adjacent sectors showed the truth in brutal clarity. Human ships emerging like figures stepping from fog, not decloaking, just ceasing to pretend they weren't there all along. USS Nautilus logged similar reports during Cold War patrols. Sonar operators would hear nothing for hours, then suddenly detect a submarine practically alongside. The trick wasn't technological. It was human, crafting patterns that blended into background noise until the moment of attack. When salvage teams finally boarded the dreadnought's wreckage, they found 11 cell blocks intact. Human prisoners sat precisely where last logged, all accounted for, all smiling. Final analysis determined 3 escaped, coincidentally matching the number of supply drones recorded entering the ship during routine delivery cycles over the past month. Not stolen, just ridden like elevators. The galaxy learned its lesson that day, not about stealth technology. About human patience. We don't disappear. We wait, lights failed. The Marines preferred it that way. Emergency power flickered out across the dreadnought's corridors, plunging the ship into absolute darkness, the kind only found in deep space or subterranean warfare. The aliens froze. Their eyes, evolved for binary star systems, strained against the blackness with visible distress. Behind them, human pupils dilated instantly. Night adaptation protocols activated. Advanced species built infrared optics. Humanity bred soldiers who could navigate by touch and memory alone. The Marines didn't just operate in darkness, they weaponized it. USMC training sinks this truth into recruits at Quantico. Night exercises without NVGs. Blindfolded weapons drills. Learning to count steps between obstacles until muscle memory overtakes vision. The aliens relied on sensor overlays. The Marines trusted something older, the human brain's ability to construct mental maps where eyes fail, emergency. Klaxons wailed through the decks. Useless, the sound-masked 12 sets of boots peeling away from predetermined positions. The aliens swung their loom sticks wildly, light rods designed to pierce any shadow. All they illuminated were empty corridors and the occasional discarded restraint left precisely where human wrists had been moments before. World War II commandos called it patting the cat, moving silently through enemy territory by memorizing every loose floorboard. The Marines applied those century-old lessons here. Each prisoner knew the exact number of steps to their designated rally points, knew which deck plates creaked under alien boots but stayed silent under human weight distribution. The insectoid security captain barked orders into its comlink. Standard containment procedures. Seal the corridors. Flood with stun gas. Except someone had manually overridden the atmospheric controls 18 minutes prior, during a routine systems check by prisoner work crews. The vents remained shut. The darkness stayed. Night vision amplifies light. Human tactics eliminated entirely. Ancient Mongol archers fired volleys by sound during sandstorms. The Marines' ancestors remembered those lessons when they tore luminescent algae strips from their uniforms. Biological markers the aliens used to track prisoners in darkness. Now those same strips littered the floor like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Backup generators hummed to life 3 decks below. Too late, critical seconds had passed. The duration it takes for dilated pupils to contract. The exact window the Marines needed. Whispers carried through the blackness. Not random words, coordinates. Prisoners tapping fingernails against bulkheads in rhythmic sequences. Not Morse code. Something cruder. Stalingrad sewer patterns updated for starship acoustics. Metal transmitted sound at specific frequencies beneath alien hearing range, but perfect for human ears. Tunnel rats in Vietnam navigated VC complexes by feeling air currents on their cheeks. The Marines tracked ventilation pulses through the ship's infrastructure. Cool drafts marked junction points. Warm spots signaled machinery access. They moved like shadows through shadows, not invisible, just unnoticed. The crystalline lieutenant triggered its bioluminescent panic display. Brilliant blue waves pulsed from its carapace. Beautiful. Useless. Human retinas automatically averted from the sudden light while the Marines' own troop movements continued uninterrupted. They'd prepared for this. Weeks spent memorizing the alien stress reactions ensured every contingency was covered. Somewhere in the darkness, a helmet clattered to the deck. Deliberate misdirection. Alien guards spun toward the sound, standard training. Human jaws clenched in silent laughter. They'd spent days conditioning their captors to associate noise with threats. Now the game reversed. Flashbang grenades would have been too obvious. Instead, engineering crews heard what sounded like reinforced glass cracking near the primary coolant lines. No actual damage, just the psychological effect of that specific sound in that particular location. Guards abandoned positions to investigate phantom sabotage. World War I miners dug tunnels beneath enemy trenches to plant explosives. The Marines worked similarly. Their tunnels were blind spots in security protocols. Their explosives were cognitive shocks. Every feint and ruse drove the enemy deeper into predictable response patterns. The aquatic guards fared worst. Their sonar-based tracking couldn't distinguish between human heartbeats and the ship's own harmonic vibrations. Not after prisoners had spent weeks humming at resonant frequencies during cell inspections. Now the entire detention block pulsed with overlapping biological and mechanical echoes. Alien after-action reports would later note with puzzlement how no night vision devices were found on escaped prisoners. They missed the point. The Marines didn't need technology to own the dark. They carried the advantage in their DNA. Primates evolved color vision to spot ripe fruit in rainforest canopies. Humans kept the more ancient edge, superior night sight retained from nocturnal ancestors. The aliens, with their dazzling cities and permanent daylight, had forgotten what lurked beyond the glow. Phase 3 reached its crescendo without a single shot fired. Just the steady, silent advance of humans using darkness like a scalpel, cutting communications here, isolating guard posts there, never engaging directly, simply disappearing from one location and materializing where least expected. The insectoid captain screamed at its subordinates to form perimeter defenses, standard doctrine when ambushed. Exactly what the Marine had predicted during those long hours of interrogation, where he'd studied their tactical manuals disguised as prisoner literature. Zero-light navigation wasn't about vision. It was about pattern recognition, the ability to reconstruct entire battle spaces from memory and sound cues. Ancient hunters tracked prey through dense forests by broken twigs and disturbed leaves. Modern Marines navigated starships via ventilation hums and vibration patterns. When backup lighting finally engaged, it revealed nothing but empty corridors and confused alien sentries. The detention block stood vacant, not breached from outside, opened from within. Security feeds showed impossible footage, shadows moving against light sources, figures appearing where scans showed emptiness. The aliens checked their equipment for malfunctions, found none. They'd made the classic mistake of equating technological superiority with control. The Marines knew better. True darkness wasn't absence of light. It was the space between attention spans. Ancient naval battles turned on who could see first through fog and cannon smoke. Space warfare followed similar rules. The fleet hadn't just hidden in the void. It exploited the enemy's assumptions about what darkness contained. Final damage assessments proved most humiliating. Not a single human casualty. No forced entries. Just a series of precisely timed system failures culminating in perfect chaos. The lesson was ancient but enduring. Creatures who evolved fearing the dark will always lose to those who learn to hunt in it. Blackout conditions persisted for 19 more minutes. When full lighting restored, the bridge crew found their captain pinned by 3 Marines who hadn't been there when the lights failed. Their weapons weren't drawn. They didn't need to be. "You keep looking for our stealth tech," the lead Marine said, adjusting his grip on the captain's restraints. "Problem is, we weren't hiding." He jerked his chin toward the viewport where the fleet floated in perfect formation. "You just forgot to look where the light wasn't." Phase 4 commenced with a single command given in the dark, whispered so quietly even nearby Marines barely heard it, appropriate for warriors who'd turned shadow into a weapon. "Welcome to the jungle." The intercom clicked. Once. Cold. Final. Then fire filled every view screen on the bridge. The alien captain watched his dreadnought starboard, side bloom in silent explosions, not random strikes. Surgical incisions, primary thrusters first, then weapons clusters, life support nodes last. The human fleet wasn't just attacking. It was dissecting. Hiroshima hadn't been about ending the war. It was about starting the peace on certain terms. Phase 4 operated under the same calculus. The aliens had mistaken human patience for weakness. Now they'd learn what patience fueled by wrath could do. Tactical displays showed the full horror unfolding in crisp lines of data. 23 separate impact points timed to nanosecond precision. Each explosion triggered secondary failures in predicted patterns. The humans hadn't just studied their enemy's technology. They'd reverse-engineered its soul. Containment breach Sector 12. The crystalline officer's pulsed light patterns showed exhaustion. 8 hours straight at battle stations. Standard human endurance training accounts for 16 before performance decay. The aliens never considered they'd need such stamina. Phase 1 had mapped their weaknesses. Phase 2 exploited their blind spots. Phase 3 owned their darkness. Now Phase 4 delivered the lesson. The aquatic delegate's membranes flared in panic. Its personal screens showed catastrophic damage reports scrolling too fast to process. Not coincidence. Human electronic warfare specialists had tailored each display's update rate to induce specific stress responses. Ancient torture technique, controlled drip feed of despair, primary shield generators offline. The insectoid tactical officer's announcement wasn't necessary. The entire bridge crew could see the massive dreadnought slowly rolling in space, its artificial gravity failing in waves. Still structurally intact, utterly defenseless, the Marine stood at parade rest near the ruined command console, not gloating, observing. He'd seen this moment 100 times in training simulations. Human strategists called it the silence point, when enemy forces realize resistance is mathematically impossible, but haven't yet surrendered. The most dangerous 90 seconds in any engagement. Alien archives would later claim the humans fired first. The truth was more nuanced. They simply stopped pretending they hadn't been aiming the whole time. Fire control systems aboard the dreadnought had registered minor calibration errors for 72 hours prior. Always during shift changes. Always self-correcting before diagnostics could complete. The cumulative result became suddenly obvious as every human-held position aboard ship simultaneously reported weapons free. Ancient Mongol sieges used similar psychology. Surround a city, demonstrate overwhelming force, then wait. The besieged either surrendered immediately or held out until starvation broke them. Either way, the outcome was certain before the first arrow flew. Damage control teams reported impossible scenes. Human prisoners hadn't just escaped their cells. They'd methodically sabotaged systems in sequences that only now made sense. A coolant line rupture here forced reactor shutdowns there. A deliberately weakened structural beam caused decks to collapse in precise patterns, sealing security forces in useless compartments. The Marine watched alien command staff scramble. Not with anger, clinical interest. Their responses were textbook. Exactly as predicted during those long months of interrogation where he'd studied their decision trees, disguised as defiant responses. Output screens darkened one by one. Not from damage. Human boarding parties hadn't cut power. They'd simply rotated all displays 90 degrees. A simple trick. Alien interface protocols couldn't adapt to landscape mode. The equivalent of slamming the enemy's eyelids shut. Communication arrays gone. The Avon officer's wings drooped, not from physical injury. The realization that no distress signals had escaped. The humans weren't just winning. They were controlling the narrative. Nuclear strategists call this the demonstration strike. Not the full arsenal. Just enough to prove you can hit anywhere, anytime. The dreadnought's crippling served that purpose galaxy-wide. Every Allied ship saw their mightiest vessel disabled not by superior force but superior understanding. Flame patterns across the dying ship told their own story. Not random fires. Controlled burns steering survivors toward pre-selected containment zones. Human breaching teams didn't hunt the crew. They herded them. Ancient sheepdog tactics scaled to starship combat. Historical accounts would debate whether the final transmission from the dreadnought was genuine or human propaganda. It didn't matter. The words entered galactic consciousness regardless. They didn't beat our technology. They beat our imagination. The Marine finally moved, not toward the panicking command staff, to a secondary console. 3 keystrokes brought up real-time feeds from across the ship, not standard surveillance. Prisoner intelligence gathering points established over months of captivity. He studied the images with quiet satisfaction. Not the destruction, the patterns within it. Every fire lane established. Every fallback position covered. The complete tactical dominion humans called total battlefield awareness. Insectoid troops attempted a last stand in Hangar Bay. Predictable. Human assault teams had pre-positioned electromagnetic pulse charges days prior during Maintenance checks. The aliens' powered armor became suddenly useless mid-charge. Phase 4 complete. The Marine's announcement wasn't bravado. Simple fact. Across the galaxy, other species watched their sensors in disbelief. The invincible dreadnought hadn't just been defeated. It had been dismantled with mechanical precision over 72 minutes. No grand fleet engagement, no heroic last stands. Just cold, methodical systems failure from hull to core. Tokyo, after the fire bombings, understood this truth first. Sometimes defeat isn't sudden. It's watching everything you rely on cease functioning piece by inevitable piece. The aquatic delegate finally cracked. This isn't war. It's butchery. The Marine didn't smile, didn't gloat, just keyed another sequence. The main display shifted to show the galaxy map. Every known alien-held system pulsed amber, then red, then synchronized to the exact rhythm of the dreadnought's dying power core. Message received. Lesson 1, the Marine said as escape pods began launching without orders. Don't start fights with species that think in geologic time. The demonstration's brilliance wasn't its violence. It was its restraint. The dreadnought still floated. Crew still survived. Just enough to spread the word. Phase 4 hadn't been about vengeance. It was vaccination. A controlled burn against future arrogance. The kind of operation that only works when every variable is accounted for. Every consequence weighed. Hiroshima taught that some weapons aren't wielded against enemies. They're deployed against war itself. The bridge fell quiet. Not from damage. From understanding, the humans could have annihilated them at any point. Chose instead to leave witnesses. The Marine finally turned to leave. Paused at the blast door. Not for dramatic effect. To enter one final command. Every surviving screen in the fleet lit up with 2 words in every known language. Never again. Not a threat. A promise carved in the bones of their mightiest ship. The kind of lesson that sticks. Atomic strategists would later call it perfect deterrence. The veterans who planned it used simpler terms. Phase 4, payback with interest. The galaxy learned that day. Not about human cruelty. About human memory. Species that survive ice ages don't forget predators. They catalog them. Prepare for their return. The Marine stepped over fallen command staff without glancing down. They weren't the audience. The real message was already streaming across deep space networks. He inhaled the acrid bridge air once, memorized the scent of hubris burning, then sealed the door behind him. Some lessons couldn't be taught. Only demonstrated. Phase 4 had run its course. The alien captain writhed against the deck plating, his exoskeletal armor pinning him more effectively than restraints. The Marine stood motionless above him, sidearm loose in his grip. Not threatening, not holstered. Just present, like the oxygen in the room. His smile wasn't the same one from the cell block or the bridge confrontations. Something had shifted in the last 18 minutes. Not triumph, not vengeance. Something colder and cleaner. The look a sculptor gives finished marble before the chisel lifts. The dreadnought's dying systems painted the scene in flickering amber, emergency lighting cycling through its final sequences. Sparks rained from shattered consoles. Somewhere deep in the ship's gut, atmosphere vents screamed like dying animals. The Marine's smile didn't waver. Ancient Sparta had a tradition. Warriors didn't cheer over fallen enemies. They stood silent. Let the victory speak for itself. This was that kind of quiet. Phase 4 complete. The Marine's words carried no inflection. Simple status report. Behind him, human boarding teams moved through the ruined bridge with surgical precision. Not looting, cataloging. Every piece of alien tech was being documented, not stolen. A lesson from Vietnam. Sometimes intelligence gathering is the real objective behind apparent destruction. The captain's mandibles flexed. Acid spittle dripped onto the deck beside the Marine's boot. Unnoticed, or more accurately, noted and dismissed. Your mistake wasn't attacking us, the Marine said. He didn't raise his voice over the alarms. Didn't need to. It was thinking we'd fight by your rules. His boot nudged a fallen sidearm across the deck. Not taking it. Just moving it out of the captain's eyeline. Psychological warfare stripped to its bones, removing even the illusion of options. Human history carved this truth into stone, tablets and nuclear fire. Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad, places where defeat became victory, through sheer persistence. The aliens had studied these events as historical curiosities. The Marine had lived their modern equivalents. Aven crew members slumped at their stations, wings torn. Crystalline officers pulsed weak emergency luminescence. Insectoid troopers curled in on themselves, their hive coordination shattered. None were dead. All were broken. Not by weapons, but by comprehension of their own obsolescence. The Marine knelt. Not to gloat. To retrieve a small object from the captain's belt. A ceremonial dagger. Useless in modern combat, priceless for its symbolism. He turned it over in his hands once, then slid it back into the alien's sheath. Keep it. His tone suggested this wasn't mercy. You'll need reminders. Outside the shattered viewports, human ships held formation. Not firing. Not boarding. Just existing in precise geometric patterns the aliens' tactical computers couldn't parse. A living demonstration of superior understanding. The captain hissed something in his native tongue. The Marine didn't bother with translators. He'd heard enough surrender offers in enough languages to recognize the tone. This isn't vengeance. The Marine finally holstered his weapon. It's inoculation. His smile returned then. Different from before. Not the wolfish grin of the hunted becoming the hunter. Not the tight-lipped rictus of endured torture. This was something older.